Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I'm going to be doing a Blu-ray and DVD update for June 2019. So first up for the Blu-rays, we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This was a movie that I wasn't necessarily too fussed about. It looked okay, the animation style was probably the only thing to intrigue me, but other than that I wasn't really going to go out of my way to see this film until I heard how good the reviews were for it. And so reading into those, I did get spoiled a couple of times, but it sounded incredible. And it is quite the thrill ride, to be honest, both emotionally and in terms of action. And for an animated feature, the action is incredible throughout this. Very well choreographed for an animated film, to say the least. And as far as I'm aware, this is sort of the big screen debut for the Miles Morales incarnation of the Spider-Man character. And that was definitely a big deal because the character has quite a lot to offer, a more substantial story than I really anticipated. And obviously with this being a Spider-Verse movie, there is obviously more than one Spider-Man. So we have the generic sort of Peter Parker style Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, and then a whole array of different versions of Spider-Man, some of which I had genuinely never even heard of, such as Spider-Ham, which is news to me. Peter Porker, who came up with that pun? But this film overall, I would honestly recommend. It was a huge surprise to me personally. I'm not the biggest fan of Spider-Man. I still think the Tobey Maguire movies are the best Spider-Man features in terms of big screen movies with Spider-Man as a character. But this was honestly a huge surprise, and to my amazement there's actually going to be a sequel to this. I'm not 100% sure how they're going to do that without necessarily either repeating this formula or just bringing in another whole array of different Spider-Man style characters. Either way, I'm intrigued to see what future possibilities will come from movies such as this, and overall I very much enjoyed this movie, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. Next up we have the Wreck-It Ralph sequel, Ralph Breaks the Internet. This was overall, to be honest, quite a generic movie. It was very predictable in most of its pace, but it was just a fun movie. It was great to see these characters once again, and the many references, obviously, with this film surrounding the internet as a concept. There are relentless, endless references to most Disney properties, various social media websites and other websites at that. And as you can see on the back cover here, we have the Disney princess characters, etc. So this is just a minefield of reference after reference after reference, which you'd think would get repetitive, but to be honest was overall quite exciting and definitely developed the plot in a way that I wasn't expecting, with the third act, which was the least predictable moment of the film, with the whole virus scenario. That was definitely the most compelling moment of the film, and tested the friendship of both Ralph and Vanellope. So overall, I quite like this film. Very innocent, mindless fun, which overall was very well animated and overall very well executed. So that is Ralph Breaks the Internet. And last up for the Blu-rays, we have a box set that may interest history buffs who are following the channel, and that is the world-famous documentary film Shoah by French director Claude Lanzmann. This is released under the Masters of Cinema label, and I believe this is the first time this movie has ever been released in the UK on Blu-ray. So for those who are unaware, Shoah is a 9.5-hour long documentary film surrounding the brutal, honest nature of the Holocaust. And obviously that is a subject that I cannot necessarily go into in depth in a video like this, but I do hope to do a proper, thorough review on this particular film and this box set, since this release is overall incredibly well packaged. So Shoah as a film is a very interesting movie to say the least. Obviously it's incredibly long. It's split into two sections, one of which is called the First Era, and obviously the other is the Second Era, and it primarily prioritizes the very human reactions and eyewitness accounts of the Holocaust and its honest brutality, which is something that I don't think you necessarily can get from many documentary films, in particular with how Claude Lanzmann, the director, is very forceful in what he wants from people. For example, if a eyewitness is describing something, he will push for that key detail, regardless of how upsetting or traumatic it may be. And that was a very unexpected direction for this film. I purchased this box set to help with my university degree because I needed to write about this film, and this was a very eye-opening movie to say the least. It certainly is not for the faint-hearted. And therefore, I feel with how many layers there are to this particular film, it would be much more appropriate, like I said, to do a proper review of this box set somewhere in the near future. So I'll briefly do a quick look at it. So obviously we have the movie Shoah contained in here, which is spread over 2 discs, and the 4 other films are titled on the front cover, featured on 2 more discs, and a great inclusion of a very thorough, intricate sort of manual slash guide to all the movies included in this set, which I found to be very, very useful when watching Shoah, since it's quite a fragmented documentary, and it's quite hard to keep up with the pace of who's featured in which segment. So I found that to be a very useful inclusion. So those are my brief thoughts on the film set of Shoah. Again, not for the faint-hearted, but would definitely intrigue history buffs who are following the channel for sure. Moving on to the DVDs, first up we have the Spielberg classic Jaws, a movie that I have not seen probably since I started high school, which obviously was quite a while ago. And the film in itself, I didn't really remember too much about it apart from a couple of gruesome scenes, and that one really bizarre, gory scene, that sort of jump scare segment where Hooper dives underwater and finds the deceased man with the open eye socket. That was such a twisted moment, but I love films that incorporate things like that into them. And this was overall a great rewatch. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. Don't think I'll bother grabbing any of the sequels. I've heard very poor things about them. I've actually seen bits of a few of them. I think the only one I haven't seen full stop is Jaws 2. I remember seeing Jaws 3 on one of the ITV channels a few years ago. I think it took place in an aquarium or something like that, and Jaws 4, The Revenge as it was called, was just a terrible film in terms of its concept, and was very much forgettable apart from, I think it was Michael Caine starred in that movie. But yeah, Jaws is an absolute classic. Honestly, the pacing of this movie is very interesting to say the least, since I kind of lose myself in this film when watching it. I've seen this twice recently, and it's overall a very enjoyable movie, and very exciting stuff. So that is Jaws. Next up we have Starship Troopers, which funnily enough I watched last night, and I actually really enjoyed this movie. It definitely stuck with me, both for the very interesting, complicated relationship between Johnny Rico and the character of Carmen, which outlines the sort of differences between both being a civilian and a citizen, with the become a citizen kind of propaganda featured throughout this film, with the constant question of would you like to know more, as it shows you very gory, interesting videos of these bug-like aliens basically being destroyed solely for the purpose of them no longer launching meteors at planet Earth, and once a meteor goes a little bit too far and destroys a segment of planet Earth, that's when war kicks in. And that was a very interesting third act, to say the least. So great gore fest, overall some phenomenal action, and very well directed, to say the least. I really enjoyed the ending, which was very satisfying with the brain bug.
What's it thinking, Colonel?
It's afraid. It's afraid!
Yeah, overall a very interesting gore fest, great action, and overall very, very violent. So that is Starship Troopers. Next up we have a great horror movie by Danny Boyle, and that is 28 Days Later. I've had 28 Weeks in the collection for ages, but I had not picked up 28 Days. So I finally got around to watching this movie, and I loved it. Very unique take on the sort of zombie horror genre, with the rage virus outbreak, and it was overall kind of realistic in a sense. Obviously, not with the concept of zombies, but just with how the outbreak would start and how that would spread so rapidly in somewhere like London. I really enjoyed that concept, and it was overall very well portrayed, and Cillian Murphy did a fantastic job as the central character, and I really enjoyed the soundtrack by John Murphy, especially towards the end, with the sort of shootout scene, if that would make sense to you if you've seen the movie, with Christopher Eccleston's character and all the soldiers. I loved that scene, and yeah, overall phenomenal film, would highly recommend. Next up we have a handful of Tom Hanks movies, starting off with Big, a film that I had not seen, and a few friends of mine were honestly shocked that I had not seen, so I was very quick to rectify that. And I am very glad that I did, because this movie is quite humble and overall absolutely hilarious in its delivery of its very unique concept. So we have a 13-year-old boy called Josh Baskin who goes to a carnival and he appears too short for the rides and very awkward around girls and just wants to be more mature. And so he wishes to be big, to be an adult. And he becomes Tom Hanks. He wakes up in a child's bedroom and he is Tom Hanks. And honestly, from there, that really did sell the film for me. It's just absolutely hilarious from that point onwards. And what could be even better than a 13-year-old mind in the body of an adult now working for a toy company? I love that twist, and he's actually good at his job despite having no work skill or effort, etc. It's just overall absolutely phenomenal in its delivery, and Tom Hanks does a phenomenal job trying to portray a very innocent and confused child in the body of an adult. Just overall fantastic film and something that I will definitely be rewatching in the near future. So that is Tom Hanks in Big. Next up we have the Robert Zemeckis film Castaway, again starring Tom Hanks, and once again a film that I had not seen which I felt needed to be rectified. And this was a very compelling film. Obviously it is about a castaway. The character that Tom Hanks portrays works for FedEx and he's quite a square kind of person, very much by the book. And when boarding a cargo plane, he doesn't expect that the plane will obviously have an accident, and he will be the only survivor washing up on an island in the middle of nowhere. And at first, it's kind of bizarre to see his behavior. He's more or less just sort of saving the packages that wash ashore, but then he realizes that he's going to be there for a very long time, and he opens up the packages to use the contents to utilize for survival, more or less. And little does he realize he's going to be spending the next 5 years on the island. Overall, a very compelling film, like I said. It's very difficult to watch in some instances, especially the tooth scene. That was quite a level of cringe due to how painful that must have been. But this was a very enjoyable movie. And overall, I was kind of deflated by the ending. It was not an ending that I necessarily expected. I kind of imagined it just to end with him finding salvation and just going back home and more or less that being it. But what happens onwards from that is very, very depressing. So yeah, this is quite an interesting film to say the least. I would definitely recommend checking it out. Very much a thought-provoking narrative at that. And on the subject of planes, we have Sully, Miracle on the Hudson. This film was directed by Clint Eastwood and I believe was based on the events of, I think it was January 15th, 2009, it'll say on the back. Yeah, January 15th, 2009, where an emergency landing was made on the Hudson River in New York, where Captain Sullenberger, portrayed by Tom Hanks, had to make the very difficult decision to make an emergency landing on the river in order to save the lives of 155 people. This film was very compelling to say the least in terms of the actual story and the overall meat of the story, but I think its portrayal was quite drawn out in some areas, and I don't think there was enough substance to really grant this to be a full feature-length film. The court scenes at the very end were probably the most interesting parts, aside from obviously the actual event that does happen, which you do see fragmented here and there throughout the film up until you actually see the full event occur towards the very end. But I was expecting a lot more from this movie and I was kind of disappointed, to be honest. Not a film I would necessarily recommend, but I'm sure you'll find some kind of enjoyment from it regardless, and Tom Hanks delivers a phenomenal performance. So that is Sully. Next up we have a classic film from my childhood, and that is Space Jam with Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan. This film I always remember being on the UK TV channel ITV1 just every other month. It was always playing every Saturday, and I just always watched it regardless of how many times I'd seen it. It's just a film that I've always taken to, and I grabbed this, I think it was only 20p or 50p or something, really, really cheap in a store near me called Record Exchange. And I picked this up and I put it on for my nephew and he took to it immediately. So clearly this is a film, again, for the ages, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. Overall, it's held up very well to my surprise. I love the blend of the animated characters with the real world, and it's great to see that guy that, what's he called? He portrayed Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. I found him absolutely hilarious. And yeah, the storyline is very convoluted with the aliens basically invading to kidnap the Looney Tunes in order to make them perform in a theme park in outer space. Overall, very whack storyline in terms of its insanity, but made for a great, entertaining film, and I very much enjoyed rewatching this and reliving some great memories. So that is Space Jam. Next up, we have a couple of box sets, beginning with The Critic, the complete series. This show is very much a short-lived animated series created by Simpsons showrunner Al Jean, funnily enough, and it definitely harnesses that early classic Simpsons comedy style, very much so to the point where the character of Jay Sherman, obviously the fictional film critic featured throughout this series, actually crops up in a random episode of The Simpsons, where he is actually quite the successful sort of go-getter style character, whereas this series portrays him in the complete opposite light, where he's very much a down-to-earth, humble kind of character who is just down on his luck the majority of the time. And overall, I find this series absolutely hilarious for its very innocent stories, which turn out to be quite shocking and nasty in some areas, and also the very random array of pop culture references relating to movies. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out this show if you remember that particular Simpsons episode. Then that may be a great intro to this show for sure. And I love the comedy style of this, like I mentioned. So that is the complete series of The Critic, a very heartwarming television show. Next up, we have the complete series of Nickelodeon's Rocko's Modern Life. I've wanted to grab this show on DVD for quite a while. I was originally going to grab the American Shout Factory release of this series, but randomly the UK had a pre-order available for series 1 through to 4 of the show, and so I put a pre-order in for that, and I received it a few months ago, and I've been slowly working my way through this. I often watch cartoons like this in the background when I'm at work. It just makes life that little bit more bearable, to say the least, and so shows like this do definitely help and are incredibly entertaining. And this show is more or less the best of sort of absurdist style humour with the characters of Rocko, Heifer, Filbert, etc. And I just love their zany adventures. The voiceover work is something that really intrigues me when it comes to this series. And yeah, I just love the sort of old classic Nickelodeon cartoons. I'm very much looking forward to the Rocko's Modern Life TV movie Static Cling, which is coming out very soon. So that is Rocko's Modern Life, the complete series. And next up in terms of box sets, we have House MD, the complete season 1. I've heard very good things about House. Apparently it's quite an addictive series and something that I have wanted to start for quite a while. So obviously this will be my ticket to doing so. I grabbed this for only 50p, which I thought was a very good deal for how much content you're getting. And yeah, for a 6-disc set, I'm very much looking forward to checking this show out. So that is House. Next up, we have the last 3 seasons I needed of the original Teen Titans anime cartoon from 2003. This show is very much addictive. I've always found myself immediately buying the next corresponding season after finishing the one previous. So, having finished season 2 with the Terra storyline, I immediately grabbed season 3, which is overall my favourite season of the show, to be honest. I loved the Brother Blood storyline with Cyborg, the very interesting hallucinatory episode where Robin is seeing Slade Wilson was one of my favourites, and I loved the finale of a Titans East episode. That was definitely one of my favourites for sure. So season 3, probably my favourite overall. Quite liked season 4 as well, with the Trigon storyline with Raven. And some great episodes on here too. And season 5 was very good as well. I just hope they do actually do a revival for this show. There's a new TV movie, or at least a straight to Blu-ray movie coming out called Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, which I watched the trailer for recently. I'm not a fan of Teen Titans Go by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it's pure trash, to be honest. It's just anti-comedy in my opinion. But the trailer actually looked okay. It's obviously not going to be the good Teen Titans versus those fucking McDonald's toy excuse characters. But it just looks interesting, to be honest, of sort of having these worlds merge and collide. which I think is a good concept in itself. I just hope the execution is a lot better than what it seems in the trailer, but it looks okay, it looks watchable to say the least. And perhaps if that movie does do well, we will get a 6th season of the incredible original Teen Titans show. There is also the Trouble in Tokyo movie I'm yet to grab. I have tried to look for that for at least under £10, and it's about £13-14 everywhere. So I'm going to hold off on that for now, but I'm very much looking forward to grabbing that at some point in the near future. But that's the original Teen Titans. For sure would recommend this cartoon. Fantastic animation and some great storylines with some phenomenal DC comic characters. Next up we have the Disney classic movie Dumbo, which is a film I didn't really intend on grabbing anytime soon. I'm not really a huge fan of the Disney classic movies. I'm more of a Pixar fan personally, but the way I acquired this, you'll see in the stack of stuff I'm yet to show, basically the complete series or the rest of the series of Parks and Recreation on DVD. I ordered, I think it was Series 3 or Series 4 from the seller on eBay, Music Magpie. And so I ended up with Dumbo instead of whichever series it was of Parks and Recreation. So I complained, and they sent me another copy of Dumbo, which is so bizarre. I don't really understand why. Obviously just a packing error, but third time lucky I did get the DVD I ordered, but they just let me keep both copies of Dumbo, so I watched Dumbo. And it was actually quite good. One of the discs was, funnily enough, scratched, so it was good that I actually got a second copy. And it was a very short film, only an hour, quite trippy in some areas, and I loved the character of Timothy the Mouse. Definitely a happy mistake, to say the least. I'm glad this film fell into my possession, so that is Dumbo. Next up we have the first 3 series of the Channel 4 drama Misfits. So here's Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. Which, to be honest, after Series 3, I felt incredibly deflated. To the point where I kind of don't really want to carry on watching this TV show. I was hooked on Series 1. Series 1 was absolutely phenomenal with these sort of stereotypical Asbo-style teenagers doing community service, and they get struck by lightning and gain superpowers. And it's more or less a sort of coming-of-age style storyline of, you know, sex, booze, clubs, drugs, etc. Only with a twist with these characters having superpowers. And that was a great twist. Overall, incredible storytelling and phenomenal acting from everyone involved with the show. And Series 2 only progressed that and just made it all the more interesting, in particular with the time travel storyline, which I won't go any further on that, since that would probably spoil the most interesting story of this entire show. But yeah, that was overall a great foundation for this second series, since I was kind of curious where they could take it after this one. But yeah, it was overall very much incredibly portrayed in the second series, which left me wanting a third one. And unfortunately, the main character, Nathan, the actor who portrayed him, basically just left the show, which kind of ruined things in a sense, since he was probably the most interesting character with probably the most amount of screen time, and overall was one of the most captivating storylines.
What the hell are you doing? It's just pure mindless vandalism. What is the matter with you? Are you mentally deficient? If I was mentally deficient, I would have missed.
And so with him just leaving in Series 2, that kind of left things at a loose end in Series 3. The storyline in terms of the time travel stuff got wrapped up in here, and there was some very interesting relationships formed in this third series, but yeah, they kind of tried to replace Nathan with this other character called Rudy, who was very similar in a sense, and his story kind of grew on me. But by the end, I just felt very deflated, and knowing what I know about Series 4, I don't know whether or not I should even bother purchasing it and spending my time watching it or not, let alone Series 5, where pretty much the entire cast is replaced. So I don't know what to make of that. You can let me know in the comments if you've seen this series, whether or not Series 4 or 5 is even worth my time. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Misfits, 3 series, overall quite good. Started off incredible and ended on a decent enough note. So that's my thoughts on the series of Misfits. Next up is Jackass: The Lost Tapes. This was a DVD that I just found for, I think it was 50p in CEX, and this is more or less just another compilation disc similar to the DVD releases of the original MTV series of Jackass, with just more stunts, interviews, etc., just more comedy, and I just thought it was worth picking up. It was okay. It didn't really compare to some of the stuff that is on the MTV volume DVDs, but I guess was just worth a watch, and I probably won't keep this in the collection for too long, but it was okay. So that is Jackass: The Lost Tapes. And finally, for this update video, we have the rest of the complete series of Parks and Recreation. So I featured both Season 1 and Season 2 in my last update video, and as you can tell, I very much enjoyed watching the show. I've finished it now. It was a great binge watch, to say the least. Season 3 definitely picked things up from where Season 2 left off, and from there it was just a great example of addicted television, just like The Office USA, for example. And so there's Season 3, Season 4, which was overall very good on expanding the characters and the relationships, such as Andy Dwyer and April. Their storyline was overall quite heated and heartwarming and interesting to follow, along with the story of both Leslie Knope and Ben, and how their relationship flourishes throughout this series, which was probably the most interesting storyline overall as far as an expanding arc is concerned. And the character of Ron Swanson is quite possibly my new idol, and quite possibly the most quotable character from this series. Just overall incredible acting from him in particular in his Season 6. And the farewell season, Season 7, which I was kind of let down by the finale. I was expecting something a little bit better than sort of a flash-forward style finale, which was unique in its concept but very poor in its execution, in my opinion, and so I was very disappointed with the ending. But other than that, this was a very fun series to binge watch, very creative, and I did very much enjoy it. So that is going to do it for this update video for June 2019. I very much hope you have enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like down below, let me know in the comments any of your thoughts on anything that I have showed in this video, and be sure to subscribe for more upcoming videos.